Welcome to Cashless Savannah. It is just the two of us here to talk. Jill and I want to talk about a very dicey issue today, and I do think it needs to be said. So the issue that we want to bring up today to our audience is the issue of racism. And I want to fully acknowledge from the beginning, we are obviously two white people here to talk about racism, which typically would not be kosher. But what we want to talk about is all the racism that we deal with every day in property management. We are both full-time property managers. We're here in Savannah, Georgia. One of the biggest unexpected issues that we've dealt with here in Savannah that I really wouldn't have expected is racism. And back in 1964, Martin Luther King was here. He's been here many times. He was here many times, I should say. He's a Georgia boy. He's from Atlanta. But Dr. King came to Savannah in 1964, and back then, the demographics were very similar to what they are today in 2024, and that is what I would say 50-50. We have 50% black people, we have 50% white people. We all get along very well. Like as far as a city, we've always been very united. It doesn't really matter. And I haven't really seen a whole lot of, racial tension. I've been here a long time.
No,
I know you have as well. And so once we got into property management, now we're dealing with guests that are from outside the area coming to stay in Savannah. And that's where the racism has really popped up.
So Julie, you've been doing this for a while, and we know racism is a thing here in property management. We dealt with it for a little bit. What are some stories that you have with racism involving guests coming into town, and they don't really say exactly why they don't want to stay at the house, but we kind of have an idea of why. Could you explain that a little bit of what you've run into?
Yes. Well, as I said, Savannah is very diverse. And so any street you're on in Savannah, you're going to see white people walking. You'll see black people walking. You'll see all kind of different people around. It doesn't mean anyone's in danger, but we are finding that there are a lot of people that see something like that and they freak out. And then they're contacting us and refusing to stay. And we always say, why? Why can't you stay there? Why do you feel unsafe? That's like, it doesn't happen every day, but I would say at least once or twice a month, we're dealing with this question of, is it safe here? And we always ask them, why do you ask if it's safe? We haven't had any break-ins. We haven't had any muggings. We manage a lot of properties in town. We have not had any issues. And I want to say, as an investor myself, I'm in these neighborhoods and I've really spent a lot of time. Every time I'm rehabbing a house that I personally have invested in, I get to know the neighbors. That's a really big deal to me. We want to be a really good neighbor to our neighbors. And a lot of time a real estate investor is going to take the worst house in the neighborhood and turn it back around, because that's the one we're going to get the best, price on. So there's a house that we manage on East 71st Street in Savannah, and it's near the hospital. And it's a great house. I have personally worked there late at night alone, zero issues. And I mean zero. Great neighbors, all of the things. And this particular house, Bella, who works with us, she and I had been there just hours and hours and weeks. And the neighbor was this great guy. He happened to be black, not that it matters, but we loved this guy, Richard. He was a bus driver and, he was just always in there. So after we got to know him, we told him what we're doing. Richard was always great about taking care of our guests. Like if someone, checked in, he would always be like, hey, how are you? I'm Richard, blah, blah, make them feel comfortable. And that's just such a huge asset to us that Sid was here, So we had this one guest, it was time for them to move in. And I am human. I am a property manager, but I am also human. And I'm very territorial over our team. And so when guests are kind and they have an issue, we also are kind in return. And when they're just disgusting pieces of garbage, then we're not as kind. I'm just going to be honest with you about that, hint for the day. So this particular guest not only, said he wasn't staying, he said it very rudely. He was cursing at one of our customer service members, and I was not okay with, the behavior alone. I was like, no, I'm not going to have this. So he happened to have rented a house that's a medium term rental, so it has a minimum of 30 nights. He booked it for 3 months. And, we're expecting him to check in that day. We're not at all concerned, whatever. So he goes to check in and he contacts the office and he goes, I'm not staying here. It's not safe. And then he has all this colorful language, which that's not a good way to start off with me. So of course they reach out to me because as the boss, I get the problems, right? And they said, hey, the guest for this house is not going to stay. And I said, well, why does he feel unsafe? Same question we've asked 1,000 times. What exactly about the house makes him feel unsafe? So we started a conversation with him. He wouldn't ever say anything racial. But again, this is a great house in a great neighborhood. Nothing wrong with it. That's the only thing I can assume. And so he starts saying, well, he said there's a murder over at the JEA, which is the Jewish Education Alliance. And I said, that's 2 miles away. And that was, who knows when it was. It wasn't even like recent. It was like in the last 2 years or something. And I said, okay, that's 2 miles away. That has no bearing on this house. We've never had we go into our tape recorder mode. We've never had an issue. It's a great neighborhood, great neighbors. You're fine. And of course, he decides to be a jerk about it. And then he starts driving around Savannah, taking pictures of junk in people's lawns. And this also upset me because I love this city. And I said, okay, you're not even taking pictures of our neighbors. Like, I don't even know what houses you're pulling. I said, but junk in the yard does not make you unsafe. It just means there's junk in the yard. Okay. And again, not even on our street. I don't even know what street he was on. I really, to this day, don't know where he was. But it was nowhere close to the house he's supposed to be staying in. And I said flat out, no, we're not letting you out of your booking, mostly because he was really rude. And I said, you can cancel 2 months, but you have booked this house and blocked the calendar for the owner. And so you need to give a 30-day notice. That's in our terms and conditions. And I just put my foot down. I really did not care what this man thought of me at that point. I didn't care about the review. I really felt very strongly that he was racist, and I'm not okay with that. And I let him know that, and he never said a racial thing. Well, of course, they end up, because it's, several $1,000s, they're like, fine, we'll stay there for 30 days. And we're like, okay, great. They pull in the driveway to check in. I think they had been there a couple times, but they finally had resigned themselves to going in. They go to pull in the driveway. There's a headless black cat in the driveway, if you can believe this. To this day, I swear to you, had nothing to do with it. Of course, we've been brawling with this guy for like a couple of days. And he's like, there's a dead cat, and I know you did this. And I'm just like, what? I will never forget when I saw that message. I was like, he's telling us there's a what now? So he's thinking we're like giving him this omen, which unbelievable. Well, during all this, I don't even think they made it out of the driveway. They're just chewing us out, how horrible we are. Well, lo and behold, Richard, who lives across the street, sees them in the driveway, and they're standing there for a while. Richard comes out and says, welcome to the neighborhood, I'm Richard. And the poor guy, he has no clue anything that had gone on, no idea that this guy hates us, we hate him, no clue at all. And he just was himself, his wonderful self. He introduced himself, told him about the neighborhood, everybody's so great. And the guy tells the neighbor, he's like, there's a headless dead cat right here, and I think they put this here. And Richard goes, no, I saw it happen. He goes, a bird dropped it there. All of a sudden, emergency's over. Now they're seeing, this very kind black gentleman as their neighbor, and they end up moving into the house. Well, they ended up liking the house so much that they stayed the entire 3 months. The bad part of the story was that during their stay, I happened to pick up the phone, and it was this gentleman calling, this guy that had just been so mean. And he said, Julie, this is so-and-so. And I said, oh, how are you? Now we're friends. And he said, Richard died last night. And it was very tragic. Richard just died very unexpectedly of a heart attack in his sleep. And we went to the funeral together, me and this guest that had been like, I'm not staying there. And I really feel like he got a good education living in Savannah and going, just because you're going to see someone of a different color or race, it does not mean you're unsafe. It just means they're a different color or race. And I was, I hated that poor Richard passed, but what a blessing he was in my life. And I just felt like that guest, I feel, got a different perspective. And he even extended his stay. They even ended up staying longer. Chandler, where have you witnessed racism while being a property manager?
So it's in Savannah as well. Not too long ago, we actually had a guest check in and just immediately wanted to leave. And I always like feedback, so I was kind of asking, hey, what's the deal? He was like, oh, I think there's a mold issue in here. And I was just kind of like, okay, let me I was just in the house that same day, and so
It's a great house.
I checked it, and I didn't think there was a mold issue there. Well, what happens is we actually had an identical house right across the street, and it was vacant. We're like, hey, would you like to just move over here? If you don't feel good in this one, would you like to move here? And he was like, oh, well, it smells like dogs all over this entire neighborhood. I don't like the neighborhood. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I know exactly why you don't like this place. So we did it very similar. Hey, stay for 30 days and then you can leave. But yeah, I just kind of knew after that. I was like, I know why you don't want to stay here. But yeah, it's such a weird situation in the Airbnb world. It's hard to handle.
And as property managers, I mean, we live and die by our reviews.
Yeah.
And so we want that good review. We want to do a good job, and we're really proud of the products that we have. But there's nowhere that we're going to just go scrub the county and make it all white people. Like, that's not okay.
No.
And that neighborhood as well is very diverse. We have 4 units there, never one issue. But is it racially diverse? Absolutely. But we're very proud of that. Those neighbors are wonderful as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult because they won't say the word. They won't say anything specific, but they're always very adamant.
Yeah, you can. It's pretty easy to pick out. Like, hey, I want to leave. And I was like, the property was completely fine when I checked it at 3 o'clock that afternoon. But yeah, so the question I kind of want to extend on this is like, so I know one thing that I learned from Bigger Pockets was David Green was like, always choose your neighbors wisely. He talked about, I think there was 5 things he looked at when buying a property. And one thing I never really heard him say was like neighbors. And I was like, okay. So in Europe, like, what is it that like in neighbors would you not buy a property, or like what's bad and what's not?
Okay. And that's a great question.
Yeah.
And again, I'm very proud about how diverse our city is.
Yeah.
So it would absolutely not have anything to do with color, but and the neighborhood does matter, especially for furnished rentals. People don't know the area. You want them to feel safe. And so for me, when I'm looking, I'm looking at cars in the yards, trash. You know, when you have a lot of rough houses around, that can be difficult. But when the places where we're managing, there's none of that. Or maybe it's a few blocks away. Mm-hmm. Savannah's very street by street. Some streets, you're going to have $1 million mansions, and 2 blocks away, you will have a much more working class area.
Very true.
That just is what it is.
Yeah.
Does it mean the people in the $1 million mansions are unsafe and are getting murdered? No, they're very safe. It's just that we have poverty mixed in with more middle class and upper class homes, but it's always been that way.
Yeah, no doubt.
So it's, as short-term rental hosts ourselves, we're struggling with advertising the home appropriately, and making sure the guests feel comfortable. And there's a lot we can control, and there's a lot that we can't.
Yeah, no, that's always been the kind of a tough question, was what would be a good short-term rental neighborhood and what's not, because people just have different perspectives. Like, some things just don't bother some people, and some things do. I know, like, when I'm booking, I try to go and try to get the Google Maps and like look at everything and see the area. So kind of like you said, I guess I'm just looking at, like, is it a clean street? Is it not a ton of junk sitting around? But
this is a funny fact, and call me crazy, but as an agent, as a property manager, sometimes people they'll reference the crime reports. Have you ever looked up a crime report for Savannah, Chandler?
No, I haven't. Maybe once, actually. I feel like it's just kind of like every other place.
Right.
Probably. I don't know.
We know this town too, but I've had guests go, oh, well, I don't feel safe, so I want to move to the historic district from the south side because it's lower crime. Well, the historic district is 3 times more expensive than the south side.
Yeah.
But that's where all the crime is in the historic district.
I was about to say, there's more in the historic district, isn't there?
Right. That's the funny thing
funny.
to me. And I don't have to check a crime report. I can do that, and I have in the past to show you that. But that's the ironic thing, is they're thinking, oh, because it's a historic district, it's safer. Well, that's where a lot of stuff goes down. Like, every murder that I'm aware of that's happened, it's all been just stupid
historic
stuff at
district,
clubs. But that's where all the clubs are, is in the historic district. There aren't any clubs anywhere else.
That's funny. Okay.
So again, people think, oh, I'm only safe if X, but you're talking to two people that know this town very well and are all over it day, night, and weekend. And for them to tell me, oh, I'm safer over here because of the crime report, I'm going, no, you're not. Like the statistics don't go with that. So
would you ever buy a home based on the crime report?
No, I never have.
Yeah.
Okay, first off, I purposely buy homes in a little bit rougher sections. Like that's a big part of how I've done so well with my portfolio. I find the path of progress and I try to get 1 to 2 blocks on the other side of it, because I know that money's flowing in everywhere, especially in Savannah. We've got a very hot market, and stuff that's rougher or more working class today, it's probably going to be, worth a lot. I mean, I have houses that I've paid $50,000 for that are now worth over $300,000 because I managed to do that very successful. Now, has it been 7 or 8 years since I bought those houses? Yes. I have time on my side, but I purposely would probably go into a crime-ridden area because I know that's where the best deal is.
Yeah, no doubt. That was just kind of know. I guess you got to know, like, hey, is it still very crime-ridden? And then go based off of there. Hey, okay, still crime in here. Let's just do a long-term rental for now, and then.
Right.
Once it builds into it gets nicer, you can start turning it into a medium-term rental or whatever.
I have some properties, as you know, Chandler, and they're right next to a bunch of Section 8.
Yeah.
And nothing against Section 8. I in a way, that's a great model. I don't have any. And the units that I have are going to be very nice once I'm done rehabbing them. So I'm not worried about the quality of my units, but around it is all the Section 8. And there are lots of people walking, and it's just, most people don't have cars. And so I've decided to make those long-term rentals just because I feel like it's just more of a long-term play. And later, once the area comes up, we can furnish them then. Yeah. So, it really does depend on the neighborhood. And this is the truth. This is the one time I've done this, but I was looking at those units for the first time with my husband several years ago, and there were gunshots. And so that was another thing that I was like, well, we'll just make these long-term rentals, and then later we can flip them.
Wait, you saw gunshots in the unit?
No, we heard gunshots.
Oh, you heard gunshots.
The top-down duplex on 50th. We were inside there, and I'm not super tuned into these things. I did hear noise, and I just didn't think about it. I'm not someone that walks around scared. Yeah. Like, I'm always walk around not worried about anything, and then I'm shocked when something happens, But my husband's like, did you hear that? And I was like, oh, yeah. And he's like, that was a gun. And I was like, oh. That's in every city. I'm not trying to freak anyone out of it. And we've never experienced anything like that. We've certainly spent a lot of time.
I guess I'm similar to your husband when it comes to that kind of stuff. I listen to stuff like that. So.
But that's the only time I've ever heard anything like that. And I'm always in these lower class neighborhoods every day. Yeah,
but it's crazy. What I can say is like Savannah now, and those neighborhoods that you're investing in now are totally different than when I was in high school, which would have been 2013, 2014. I remember people talking about those neighborhoods because they were still crime. And now, like, big, beautiful churches in the neighborhood, like new houses everywhere around it. So it's a totally different neighborhood. I don't think some people have gotten away from the old, like, oh, I remember hearing about that in 2013, 10 years ago, but it's a totally different place
10 years is a long time in real estate.
10 years ago, literally 10 years ago. So it's a totally different place than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. So. Well, and the first house we did in South Garden, I love the 31404 zip code. Yeah. Back in the day, things were very cheap. And I made, it's called Hospital House. That was the first one I did. And I got it for $51,000. And I made it into a furnished rental. And I knew it was a working class area. Yeah. And there was some, stuff in the yards, but not bad. And I was like, it was kind of a risk for me. But we haven't really had issues at all in that house. People saying,
I swear there's a flip every other house on that.
Yeah,
like
it's just incredible.
Yeah, it really is. There's new builds everywhere. That's a totally different neighborhood than when it was. And there's still a ton of building going on. I mean, there's brand new commercial going up, tropical smoothie, and a huge car place. So that just shows you how much
Right.
that neighborhood has changed, and it's just going to keep. I already know they're just going to keep extending that all the way down, making it all commercial. So yeah,
Well,
totally different.
and I'm very proud of that neighborhood because I have personally done a lot for that neighborhood.
Yeah,
I have
it's-
multiple properties in there.
great
Once
for your
I buy
investments,
one,
too.
I'll buy everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the other thing is that you can single-handedly bring up a neighborhood by buying just a couple of houses on the same street.
Yeah.
And once your houses look nice, the other ones do too. And especially when you're in furnished rentals, you have to keep that property nice. And we've had a lot of owners in that neighborhood ask us to manage, and I'm really proud that we're keeping all of those houses really high level, trash free, and
Yeah.
we've had very little issues. But I guess if there was one thing I'd like to get out there about Savannah, which I think I'm just really proud of, is how diverse Savannah is. It's really diverse. It's filled with really amazing, wonderful people you treat them right, they're going to treat you right. Like I really am really proud to
That's the
say
truth.
that.
That's the truth for
So
sure.
I think if we could get the word out about that, you're going to live in neighborhoods with all these ethnicities. And that's the great thing about using an Airbnb or a short-term rental, is that you get to kind of live in the neighborhood and experience it like the locals. Versus a hotel, you're not going to get the same kind of experience. So anyway, this is an issue that we fight almost every week. We're having to deal with this question. And so I just feel like it's important to talk about. Hopefully we never deal with it again.
Yeah. So to end it, Savannah really is a beautiful town, beautiful place to come visit. We do deal with racism when guests come in. Locals are just used to it, so we don't deal with it with locals. But when guests come in, it's a totally different kind of a culture shock for them. But it's a good learning experience for them. They kind of they interact with different people, and I think it's a good thing. So, but thanks for tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this as much as possible. And we will see you in the next one. Thank you.
Bye-bye.